With the actions in the reducer finished, we now need to connect our React Native app to Redux. And connecting involves two things. First of all, we need to make our React app aware of Redux. And if you used Redux on React for the web, you learned that you do this in the index.js file. So whenever you basically mount your root component, you wrap it with this provider component from React Native. And it's no different here. So in the index.js file, where we essentially tell React Native what our root component is, we will add an import to import something from the Redux package. Excuse me, not from Redux, from React Redux. That something is our provider component. Now, this provider component here will be connected to our store and will then wrap this app component so that we mount the provider component, which is just a very thin wrapper, that we mount that as our root component. For that, we first of all need to have a store though. So let's go back to the store folder, and in there, I'll add a new file directly on the store folder level, which is named configure store.js. The name is totally up to you. This will just be a factory function that returns a store. And I set it up as a factory function so that we could pass an argument to it to dynamically configure the way we set up the store, which can be important if you want to have different configurations for iOS or Android. But more about platform-specific things later in the course. For now, let's simply configure the store by first of all importing something from the Redux package. So not from React Redux, but from Redux itself. That something is named create store, and it's a function which does just that. It creates a store. I also will import combine reducers. We only have one reducer right now, so technically this wouldn't be required right now, but I still want to import it so that we, once we add more reducers, can add them very easily. So let's create our new constant, which is the root reducer then. There I will use combine reducer to combine multiple reducers into one, root reducer. That's actually simple. For that, I need to import my reducers. And here we only got one. It's my places reducer. I import that from the reducers folder and there from the places file. In combine reducers, I now pass a JavaScript object where I map any keys of my choice to my reducers. Here I will map places so that I can later access this slice of the state, the places related slice on this property, to places reducer, just like this. Now we can create our store. And for that, I will create another constant here, which I'll name configure store, which should be a function which right now won't receive any arguments, but you could add them if you wanted to dynamically create your store. In here, I will simply return a call to create store, where I now will pass my root reducer as an argument. Because create store expects to get one single reducer, which can be combined reducer, which will be our root store, or our single source of truth for this root store, the single place which may update the root store and also defines the initial state since we defined it in the reducer. So with that, we got this. Now I will export this configure store function as the default of this file. So with that, we got a way of creating a store. Now I will go back to my index.js file, and there I will import my store. So I will import configure store, this function, from, and now let's go to the source folder, to the store folder, and there it's from the configure store file. The next step is to create some JSX where we wrap our app component with the provider. And if our goal is to write JSX, we must not forget to import React from React, otherwise we will get an error. Now I'll create a variable here, and I'll simply name it React Native Redux. You can name it whatever you want. And this will wrap some JSX code. It will wrap my provider component, which then, or hold my provider component, which then wraps my app component, which is a self-closing component. The provider receives the store property where I simply want to pass my store. I'll create it and store it in a variable named store or a constant named store by executing configure store. Keep in mind, configure store is a function. So we execute that function, it gives us back the store, and that's the store I now pass to my provider. With that, the Redux provider is connected to my store. This is the part where you could pass extra configuration. Now with that, we got our Rn Redux constant here. Now we need to run this instead of our app. Now using Rn Redux like this wouldn't work because this is just some JSX code, but register component actually expects to get a function here which doesn't return JSX as it would now, but that returns another function that then returns JSX. Because keep in mind, previously we here returned app, and app was a React component. And what's the simplest way of writing a React component? Well, it's just writing a function, like in placeList. It's just a function that returns JSX. So here it expects to get a React component, and therefore it expects to get a function that returns JSX. Well, that's no problem. Let's simply rewrite this here to a simple React component, so to a function which then returns our JSX code. So I quickly turned this into an arrow function that returns this JSX code. With that, I now can use Rn Redux because now we have a function here where we have another function that returns JSX. So this is now connected. We got a store, that's all connected. Let's now connect our container to React Redux so that there we can dispatch actions and we can get our state. Let's do that in the next lecture.